Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're actually running slightly early, I noticed. We're about 2 minutes. I think it's like a first ever, not just for finished vehicle logistics, a conference, but probably for vehicle logistics ever to be perfectly on time, at least the past 2 years, right? Welcome to the last session. We just have our panel between you, a beautiful sunset and cocktail reception out on the beach, so I'm sure they're going to make it all worth the wait. Just a few housekeeping bits kind of before we dig in here. You can see on the screen, once again, the indications to how to sign on to our live site. We actually are going to request later, after the panel, that you all do actually log in, if you haven't already, because we have some questions from our gold sponsors, some sort of survey questions, and we'll do a live kind of Q&A where we can see the percentage, survey. And obviously we'll do that via the app. So at some point, either now or during the session, or again, we'll bring the screen up again later, we would want you to do that. And again, just a reminder for those of you who weren't here this morning, when it asks you for your delegate number, that one starting 150, that's on your badge. So you're walking around with that. You can get that via the bit.ly link there or the website. It's in the program. So hopefully you can join us for that at some point. Also, once again, you'll notice you have evaluation forms in front of you or were on the seat when you sat down. Please, as Louis mentioned, do take the time to fill those in before you leave, whether that's today, hopefully not, but if you're back tomorrow by the end of the conference, there will be a prize draw. I think it's some Fortnum Mason's biscuits. I always like to say the Queen's favorite biscuits. I'm pretty sure it's true, but so we'll give those away to the winner. We really take that very seriously. I mean, just as an example, the location of the conference this year was a direct influence from that kind of feedback. We were eventually, no offense to those local, but we were told that Costa Mesa is not Newport Beach, so here we are back in Newport Beach. So, we really value the feedback. It's how we shape the program. It's how we shape the organization. So give us your opinion. It matters to us. After the session, we're going to have the gala dinner, which is hosted by our premier sponsor, Jack Cooper. As I mentioned, that's actually out on the water, well, not on the water, but next to the water, near the, I think, the Newport Dunes. I'll explain a little bit how you get there at the end, but effectively, it's a less than 10-minute walk from here, and we'll have people guiding you and some signs. So obviously, if you want to go back to your rooms and get your sunglasses and suntan lotion or put your bikinis on or something like that, there will be some signs to do that as well. So we look forward to that. Okay, once again, we have a great panel set up this afternoon for you. The name of the session is Rightsizing for the New Normal. It's a bit of a jargony phrase, but I think we've heard a lot about the new normal, whatever it may or may not mean, already today. And I was thinking about it earlier before the session of what is the new normal, because actually, in some ways, if you kind of look at a top line, the new normal is looking a little like the old normal if you go back 10 years. The US sales market is heading to 17 million. If you looked at 2005, I think it was 16.9. Like at that time, it's the big SUVs and the trucks, which are back in fashion, and the sedan and small cars are obviously growing slower or in some cases shrinking, as we saw the data from PwC this morning. Obviously, that's very much driven by fuel. Price of US crude in August of 2005 hit $59 a barrel. I think if you look today at the price, it's exactly $59. So in a weird way, we're kind of 10 years ago. But I think everybody knows that this version of normal is actually quite different to the version we had then. If the economists are right, and that might be a dangerous assumption, at the very least, it seems to be a more sustainable version of 17 million. Obviously, at that time, we didn't know we were careening towards a pretty spectacular crash, so hopefully we're not going in that direction. But obviously, we're building, selling those cars in a much more profitable production network in quite a different landscape. That includes, for example, some brands who have a much bigger presence and footprint today, like Hyundai and Kia, for example, than they did 10 years ago. Others have a smaller footprint. Obviously, we have more vehicles built in the US and especially in Mexico, so we've seen some reordering of the distribution network and of the geographies of the supply chain. If we started to dig into the logistics market, we could do a roll call of sort of liquidated carriers. Mike Riggs mentioned some of them earlier, so we've had changes in the market on that side. Obviously, new regulation, which has changed hours of service, more fuel efficiency requirements and emissions things, which has, again, changed the landscape quite a bit on the trucking side. And I don't have to go into too much detail about what we learned about in rail. Obviously, the rail has its challenges as well in terms of how things have developed for the market there too. So, ultimately, the new normal doesn't seem to be very normal at all. The KPIs that we saw from a couple of different manufacturers like Volkswagen, their report card, lots of kind of what you would probably say failing marks. Jack Cooper showed us the same in terms of the delivery performance. It's just not where everyone wants it to be. So a lot of that's coming down to inconsistency, lots of variability, more complexity than we've probably ever seen before. So even if the average rail car or trucks through a facility is roughly stable, the daily changes are huge and the swings are huge, and that's obviously having a lot of impacts for all of you across the network. So how do we right-size for this new normal? What do we do? How do we contend with it? I mean, don't look at me. I'm just a journalist. I've got no idea. So I'm sure we're going to get all the answers from our panel today for you to all take back with. Well, but seriously, I think part of the answer is in sharing information, is in collaborating and exchanging data and new ideas, and that's part of why we're here. Just to carry on the 10-year reflection, just one point further, actually 10 years ago was the first issue of Finished Vehicle Logistics magazine, which you would have all received today. So we're actually going to put together a 10th anniversary issue for our October issue, so we'll be doing it over the summer. I would like to get in touch with as many of you as possible to have some of your reflections on what's changed in that period, what has changed over that period for your business, for the industry in general, and then looking out for the next 10 years and what we should be anticipating and what changes we might have. So you can be in touch with me about that. Also, my team, for those of you who haven't met them, we have our assistant editor, Rachel Hogg, who's sat here at the front. Very pleased that I'm signaling her out, I'm sure, right now. And behind her, of course, is Marcus Williams, our online and news editor. So we'll be looking to speak to you all about that kind of stuff. So, okay, that's enough of a plug from my side. I've probably gone on long enough. Let me introduce our panel for you, because it is, again, we have a great mix of car makers and providers and experts to talk about the new normal. So first we'll hear from Glenn Clift, who's the Chief Executive Officer and President of Glovis America. We're pleased also to have Brian Mason, National Manager of Strategic Planning at Toyota Logistics Services, Bob Farrell, the Executive Director of American Trucking Associations, and Scott Naz, the Managing Partner of Metrogistics. So we'll have presentations from everyone, usual format, and then we'll do some Q&A. All right, Glenn?
Thank you, Christopher. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And keeping with Chris saying that we're ahead of schedule, I've got a pretty quick presentation today, so we can stay on schedule. It seems like capacity is just one of the topics that we talk about at all of our functions these days, and in some ways it makes me wonder what we talked about in 2009, 2010, back in those days. But one of the things that it shows is back in those days, our volume dropped quite a bit. We had quite a few resources drop out of our industry. We lost a lot of truckers at that time and a lot of other equipment. And the industry has now been keeping up with the growth, although not as fast as we'd like. And that's one of the things that my team and I deal with on an everyday basis is, I've got a lot of faith in the industry that it will correct the capacity problems. The problem is the correction seems to always be lagging behind where we are today. So our goal is to, what do we do in the meantime? While the industry is correcting this problem, how do we get vehicles shipped and processed as timely as we can to avoid affecting sales for our customers. So that is something that we work on every day. One of the things I know that we have done a little differently is a lot of our planning, our logistics planning, took place on a longer, our network planning was on a longer basis. And what I see happening these days is, a lot of it's on the fly. We're reacting to something that's happened where it seems like one day you got a rail car shortage, and then the next day you have a trucker issue, and you're reacting to the situation at that time. The weather, of course, never helps us out. 2 years ago was horrible. This past winter was not so good. We had bad weather in some odd places that affected the network in some different places. But so we've been dealing with a lot of the issues as they come up. We still keep our long-term plan in place, and that's because we do feel that all of us in the room here are going to react to the growth. Now, the key to keeping the growth going is the suppliers, the railroad, the truckers have to be confident, and that's another part of our job, is to convince them that growth is going to continue, that auto sales are going to be good, and that's something that all the charts I saw today look pretty good. So I think that the analysts are all saying that. I know that myself and my team are saying that. So I'm hoping that the suppliers buy into that and invest for the future, and hopefully we won't be sitting here 2 or 3 years from now still talking about capacity. But so anyway, moving on to my slides. This is going along with what you've seen today with a growing sales market. One of the things I want to mention is that in these numbers, it doesn't mention all the remarketing vehicles that we're moving. It doesn't mention all those export vehicles that we're moving. This is U.S. retail sales. So vehicle moves are much, much larger than this. And when retail new car sales go up, of course, a lot of those other things are going up also. It also doesn't account for a changing network. Now, our customers added factories in the U.S., and what that's done is, when we were coming into 6 or 7 ocean ports, a lot of it was truck away to the local area. The average mile that we shipped was much smaller. Now with a domestic plant, when you're shipping from one spot in the U.S. to everywhere in the U.S., our average miles that we were shipping went through the roof. That's continuing. One of our customers is going to build a factory in Mexico. It's going to open up a little less than a year from now. And that's going to change because currently that product is coming from Korea. So next year that's going to all be on rail or truck or ocean, or we're making those decisions right now. So I think the industry is strong, and I am hoping that our suppliers agree with that and support us in obtaining the capacity that we need to move these vehicles. The rail capacity is something that we have been challenged with, and it was discussed a little bit earlier today. And again, they are adding capacity. They're investing quite a bit of money into this. One of the big factors that I think affects that is they depend quite a bit on the model that shows the velocity of the railroad. And if velocity is good, as they mentioned earlier today, it solves a lot of our problems. And the railroads, of course, don't want to build in a lower velocity into that model, because then it's going to require building rail cars, which congest the railroads more. So it's not necessarily the solution. But it seems like we'd always take one step forward with improvements in the network, the rail network, and then 2 steps back. We get weather issue, we get competing commodities that seem to take priority in some cases. So we're always dealing with something. I've added some articles to my scrapbook this past year I thought I'd share with you. If you've missed any of these, of course, these are going to be on the Finished Vehicle Logistics website later on, so you can catch up on some good reading here. But kind of goes to show that it's not just an issue that we're encountering. It's an industry issue. Sorry, railroads, on this one, but I know how you feel. Trust me. We hear it every day. oil, let's keep in mind that if you don't ship the vehicles, we're not going to need all that oil. So, the one part of our industry that I think is benefiting quite a bit right now is truck. If only they had more capacity for us. We seem to max out the truckers' ability to ship our vehicles quite a bit. They have plenty of job security, I know. They have challenges, though, and we talk about those at all the events. We talk about driver shortages, difficulty in obtaining capital to buy equipment or lease equipment, and they're faced with a lot of challenges. And it just seems that from what I'm hearing from other people is that we're continuing to move more and more product on truck that used to be on rail. This map here shows our network from two of our factories are close to where that origin is on that map, and the salmon colored, at least it looks salmon over here, the salmon color is what we actually truck to today. That's a long way. I remember when I came into this industry many years ago, I once asked someone, what is the industry basis of when you go from a truck destination to rail? And I remember being told, it's about 250 miles. And I don't know if that was right or not. But if you take a look at this map, we're trucking quite a bit further than 250 miles these days. The yellow area is an area that we continue to look at expanding to. And as much as I hate to do that because I know we have trucking issues, I also have rail issues. And and I don't think it should be this way, but this is what we're doing, and I know a lot of other people are doing that. Now, we're not doing it on a temporary basis just to get by with a day or two of rail car shortages. We're doing this as to give the railroads time to turn around the velocity or the rail car supply or whatever the issue is at this time. But that outer circle you see there is 1,000 miles. I know it's very small print, but that outer circle is 1,000 miles. And you can see that we are trucking to points that are about 1,000 miles from our factories down into Texas. The inner circle is 700 miles. So obviously we've expanded well beyond 250. Our network that we operate in the U.S., we've got 6 ocean ports, 1 inland port, 2 domestic factory origins that we ship from. And the yellow points there are auto ramps that we're using. Canadian network, they are currently operating with 1 ocean port, and they are also receiving product from the 2 U.S. plants. And they are operating with 12 auto compounds. You can't see them there because like a place like Toronto has 2 compounds because they're using two different railroads going to 2 different auto compounds. They're running above capacity also. They have a lot of capacity issues. The auto compounds are congested. The origin port is very congested. So they're working to solve their own issues. And one of the things that we continue to look at is whether or not to bring some of that product around into the East Coast. A lot of their volume goes into the cities on the eastern side of Canada, and it's a timing issue as it takes longer to go through the Panama Canal into a port, and then you have to truck or rail it up into Canada. Otherwise, they would be doing that already. So in Mexico, Kia, who we perform logistics work for, is building the factory in Monterrey, Mexico. That's the factory that'll be online a little less than a year from now. And we haven't made decisions about how we're going to distribute from there yet, but obviously rail is a big part of the solution. But we're also looking at short sea. We know that some of you that are shipping these days are already using short sea with varying success. But I think it is an issue that volume helps it be more efficient. One of the big issues is just the timeliness of being able, the vessel calls. How many times can you ship and the vessel rotation? So not only are we considering using it, But Glovis now has over 70 Ro-Ro ships, and we're also considering offering the service. So this rough route guide here is what service may look like. They're taking a serious look at it, and the ports that are on there, they happen to be ports that we currently use. That would, of course, the final port that's decided depends upon volume. If others join forces to use Ro-Ro or to use short sea out of there, then it may be another port if there's volume going to another port. But these are the ones that we use. They're also looking at that to go into South America. We're taking our expansion into ocean pretty serious. Recently, we brought on a seasoned professional, Scott Cornell. I know he was here yesterday. I haven't seen him yet today, but there are a lot of people here. He is our Vice President of Ocean Logistics. I see a carryover on the line there, but we are expanding in Ro-Ro, but also into bulk shipping. Plan is to be a full-service ocean logistics company. So different ways that we feel we are contributing. I definitely want to support some of the different things that our group is doing. Mike Riggs today talked about trying to gain support for some changes in highway legislation so that we can bring bigger and heavier trucks on the road. And we support that. I mean, I don't think it's a safety issue. I mean, trucks have come a long way since that law was put in place, and I think it needs to be revisited. And whether or not all trucks have an exemption, that's, I don't know enough about that to make a call on that. But definitely for auto haulers, I'd like to see that. We've got several vehicles that we're so close to making the weight limit on having a 9-car load, but we can't put the 9th car on there because of a weight issue. And if you can add one more vehicle to every load, that's quite a bit of gain in your productivity. So we support that. And I think that conferences like this and all the other industry conferences we have are extremely important. I don't know as a group if we do enough lobbying to get what we want and what we need to make this industry a little more relaxing, because my days are not too relaxing nowadays. I'm answering the phone all day asking why cars didn't get shipped, why rail cars didn't show up, and so on. But so I encourage all of us to support these groups. I really believe our job is to continue to stress to the suppliers that there's going to be growth and they need to prepare for that. I think we need to be responsible when awarding business. We need to award business to suppliers that can handle it, or at least have a very strong plan to handle it. I see people awarding business to carriers, and I think to myself, there's no way that carrier's going to handle it. And of course they don't, and they tie up a ramp, and then I can't ship into that ramp because that person's cars are in my ramp. So we hurt each other. So we got to be responsible when we're doing that. I think we should consider longer-term contracts. I don't know how the truckers do it. They take these contracts that are relatively short-term and go out and try to get financing for a longer-term asset. And if they're able to get the financing, I'm sure they're paying more for that, and ultimately we pay for that. So in most cases, I plan to use a trucker for a long period of time. I'm not planning to use them for 6 months and then throw them out and get another one. So I don't see what the harm is in giving the guy a contract that he can take to the bank and get some financing. But, and I mentioned before, just support legislation that's going to help us get our job done. So thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Obviously highlighting some very important issues there. If anyone's standing in the back wants to get a seat, we do have some free spaces here. I think people came in late. They were probably hanging out by the pool or something, and I can understand. But obviously, or maybe they were taking calls from Glovis for not, moving trucks. Probably more likely, actually, right? Yeah. Don't relax too much, actually. Next up, we're going to hear from Brian Mason, Total Logistics Services.
Good afternoon. And really like that video because it gives us an opportunity to show all of the partners that collaborate with us. And I hope we were able to get one of your vehicles or one of your rail cars or vessels in there. But if we didn't, we really do appreciate everything that all of our partners do for us. And when I saw what this was about and right-sizing for the new normal, I kind of had a different idea, and we talk about it internal at Toyota, and it's a lot about what we do, and that is really we think about it as more collaboration for the new normal, because that's kind of how we're getting things done. And as we go through those, as we go through the process of dealing with change, that first step is always, really just denial. We have enough rail cars, we have enough trucks, we have enough everything. And we get through the denial phase, and then you get into the anger phase, and we all got through the anger phase. But then you get into the exploration phase and kind of the commitment phase of saying, okay, there may be different ways to do this. There may be different ways that we can work with this. And because collaboration, really, Toyota, we don't own any vessels. We don't own any rail cars. We don't own it. Well, we own a very small number of trucks. We own about 91 trucks from our own little company on the West Coast. But really, we really look to our partners, and with our partners, we really look to embrace the concepts of PDCA. We document for transparency. We share information, and that's really helped us significantly. I think at past conferences, I've been pretty tough on rail. And I think at past conferences, I've been very focused on if rail can't move the vehicles, let's put them on truck. But what we're seeing is across the whole supply chain, everyone is trying to make things better. We've gotten through that anger phase, and we're into that exploration and commitment phase. We're really big on Genshi Genbutsu. Go and see. Go to the Genba, the workplace, the factory floor. The idea is to go out with our partners, see what problems you're facing, whether it be at railheads, whether it be at our port facilities, at our marshaling yards, wherever you're having issues. And the idea is if there's something we can do to help those partners to make that better, we want to be a part of that. Leveraging what already exists. We've all got a lot of systems, and it's great that all the truckers are really on ePod now. Internally, we've implemented ICL, and that's starting to give us just a wave of good information that we're trying to exploit. And we have our Oracle-based system, our TTMS system that we're using for freight payment and routing. So really, we're looking to leverage what we have to increase that transparency and share that information. And really, we kind of have three building blocks: that Kaizen, continuous improvement, and collaboration and trust, and that builds more transparency. And you're only going to get that if we pull our partners into the conversation and help them wherever we can help them. And Glenn talked about 3-year, longer contracts for trucks. We've gone to all 3-year contracts for truck, and I think we've gotten good feedback from that. I like to say individually, we are all strong, but together, I think this really demonstrates we are stronger. Every one of us is a strand in that steel cable, and together, we have been able to not only recover from the recovery, but also really kind of step forward and start to do some really good things in the industry. We've seen much better network flexibility. We've built enhanced interfaces with 8 different companies, 8 different new trucking and rail companies this year, where we've enhanced the information we get. And we built a new dynamic dashboard. And what that gives us is, and I think at one of the last conferences I showed a little piece of that dashboard, and that dashboard kind of morphed into a much bigger document. And a lot of people in our company get this that were never really interested in rail before, and they watch it religiously, and they think it's important now. And so it's something where it pulls together all the information from TTX, from our own rail carriers, from our own facilities in terms of monitoring our stock levels, monitoring our inventories. And what this has really helped us do is make good proactive decisions before we get in crisis. And if we start to build up stock in one place, having very good, frank communication from some of our railroads. If you can't get us rail cars, tell us, and they do. And we've had very good success with this. So I want to thank all the railroads for that. Because by doing that, by having that openness, by having that honesty, it lets us deviate to truck much faster. All of a sudden, we're not calling truck carriers in an emergency saying, we need 15 trucks yesterday. We're able to plan a little bit more, and we don't get into this big hole of too many vehicles in one place. We're stronger thanks to many of the partners investing in trucks, drivers, locomotives, and rail crews. We're in a much better situation than we were just a few years ago. And this is not to say we still don't have to continue to invest in those resources, to continue to invest in those people. However, we are much better than we were just a short time ago. And so we encourage that to continue by having those longer contracts for those truck carriers. That enables you to invest in those trucks, invest in those additional drivers, get some of those younger people into the workplace as our drivers' workforce kind of starts to age. And one of the things that we're doing is a lot of our partners are starting to work with us on Toyota Business Process to help solve problems. And one of the things we had was Vascor and TMMC and CP combined together and work together using a TBP process to solve some securement exception problems. And so that was very helpful, and it gave everybody kind of a common process to work through. Union Pacific went to University of Kentucky. They put 20 of their executives through lean process training. And that training at University of Kentucky is actually sponsored by Toyota. We actually have a faculty member on site who is the executive in residence there. Companies like Professional, I think Dave Floyd's here today, made huge investments in their facility, beautiful building, really great maintenance facilities, and a new dispatch system that makes his operation much more efficient. And that way he's able to serve us better and help us as a customer more. BNSF, quarterly conference calls with us, very open, candid communication, sharing information, telling us where they can help us and where they might have challenges so that we know in advance. We're starting to see a common thread here. It's a lot about communications. It's a lot about being open. With UP, weekly network status and weather update emails. With the last 2 winters we've had, weather and the extreme weather and extreme snow conditions have been a significant impact on all of us. So having that latest and greatest information from the railroads has been really, really helpful to us. And finally, the stink bug. Anybody in here dealt with the stink bug? We ran into this in our exports to New Zealand and Australia. And it took the combined efforts of WWL, Georgia Ports Authority, extermination companies, and both the governments of New Zealand and Australia to come up with an extermination method that we could use on this to get the bugs off the vehicles. There's probably no more unsettling feeling than when you get notified that your vessel has been quarantined by a government until it can be fumigated because they've discovered stink bugs on some, I'll say, other equipment that didn't have the Toyota label on it in the vessel, but nonetheless the whole vessel had to be cleaned. And some of the things that together, that we're stronger, and that we're working with Mazda on our new project, and we call it Project Azteca. We're going to start taking delivery of Scion IA vehicles out of Azteca starting in July, approximately July 16th. And those will be coming both by rail and short sea to the U.S. So we'll be using both Veracruz and Lázaro for short sea to the east and west coast, and then railing mostly to the center of the country. And as I mentioned before, we've done significant systems integration with 8 of our truck and rail partners that helps us get more information and also helps pass better information to them. The last thing I wanted to thank was rail industry. You've gone up 7% in personnel, you've gone up 6% in locomotives, you've added 3,000 multi-level vehicles in the last year. That's been very helpful. Don't stop, keep going. We all saw the SAR. It's jumped from the mid-16s to now. We just got our month-end results yesterday, and it's looking like industry-wise we're tracking at about a 17.2 right now. So, we want to keep that strength moving. The last thing we want to do is stall out that great market by just not having enough volume and not having enough capacity to move our volume. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian, for sharing that, sending out positive messages. It's good to see that Toad is past the anger phase. Whatever therapist or yoga instructors helped you, you might want to pass the details on to Glenn, because I'm not 100% sure that Glovis has. So we can work together in this way as well. No, but seriously, it's obviously some good messages there and interesting projects to discuss further, including Mexico, which is obviously big for Glovis as well. Next up, I'd like to invite Robert Farrell from the American Trucking Association.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Christopher. And first of all, I'd like to thank Glenn and all the other auto manufacturers in the room that have been supportive of the auto transporter productivity issue. We're still working on Capitol Hill. We keep our fingers crossed every day. And we thank you again for your support. And secondly, Brian, how did you get rid of the stink bugs? I live in Northern Virginia, and those suckers you can't get rid of, except squish them.
You have to fumigate them in a building for about 24 or 48 hours.
Not going to happen at my house. Not going to happen. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. What's the new normal? Well, most of the time we've heard today that it's great to be a car hauler. We have high production rates. We have the new plants coming on in Mexico and in the U.S. We've heard about that. It's all great. Got it. New normal issues. We've heard about the bottlenecks on the rail line, and we've heard about them. We have and the velocity at the rails, which we've heard about earlier today, and how the railroads are trying to address those. We have truck capacity issues, which are tight and made tighter by irregular releases and holds, which we've heard also today. And so we have issues that we share with our railroad partners on velocity and holds, and we've heard about those in earlier sessions. Truck driver shortage. I'll get to that in a minute. Congestion and investment. Such as Jason referred to this morning in the session on the railroads. Coming from Washington, it's like the cart before the horse. We're ready for a highway bill, but we don't have the money, so we have to wait for the Ways and Means Committee to figure out how they're going to come up with the money, so the Transportation Infrastructure Committee can write a bill, and everyone has agreed there's going to be no new taxes in regard to the federal diesel tax, which, as the trucking industry we advocate raise the fuel tax. It's the most efficient way, without diversion, to get monies into the Highway Trust Fund. But in this day and age, for some reason, nobody wants to raise the gas tax. And I say, but we can work through the issues, well, or not, and hopefully we can. Future new normals, hours of service. Last fall, we were successful in the trucking industry to have a change in the 34-hour restart. My notes here. Through the appropriation bill, we got FMCSA to back off, if you will, that Congress told them to, because we doubted and we questioned the terminology, the methodology that they used in coming up with the hours of service provisions and regulations, and Congress agreed with us. So last fall in the appropriations bill, got rid of those regulations, went back to the old one, with a directive to Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to come back with a study justifying the changes they had made. Now, appropriation bills in our government run from October 1 to September 30th, but this provision had in there a caveat that said they had to report back to Congress, and if they missed the September 30th deadline, the hours of service exemption stayed in effect until they reported back to Congress. Meanwhile, there's a movement afoot to, again, an appropriations bill for directing FMCSA again now to come back and explain in more detail and use a rationale are the old rules better than the ones that they imposed that have been suspended. You know, some of you may have heard recently the White House said they would issue a veto to the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriation Bill. That is where this hours of service language is in the House. Our lobbying folks in DC tell me that's more to do with the appropriation levels for the Department of Transportation than anything trucking specific. Driver issues. Demographics is not our friend. Baby boomers have been driving for 25 years or more, and they're ready to retire. I read a study recently that says only 6% of drivers are under the age of 35 or younger. 6%. We need anywhere from $35,000 to $40,000 drivers this year, according to ATA. Other reports say that by the time 2020 comes around, we're going to need 240,000. You know, it's interesting. Conway and Mr. Stahler held a briefing with financial analysts and basically said Conway is going to be severely impacted because they can't get drivers in the seats. So, you know, it's not a car haul issue, it's just an overall trucking industry issue. Next issue, where are we going to get our drivers? Well, the obvious answer everyone always says, let's get the military people. Well, that's great. We'd love to have them in the industry. They're hard to recruit. Other industries are also looking at them. ATA and the Chamber of Commerce are actively pursuing and working with the Department of Defense and trying to get these guys interested in a trucking career. Numerous military bases throughout the United States already have certified professional truck driving training schools on their bases. But I would throw out there something else. Maybe we need to look at, we have women drivers, maybe we need to look at that demographics more. Another thing, we have had a great influx of immigrants in this country in the past couple of years. Granted, we have to teach them to speak English, but there's a possibility. Who knows? You have to think outside the box sometimes. Speaking of thinking outside the box, my last point, right now in the United States under federal regulations, you have to be 21 years of old or older to drive in interstate commerce, one state to the other. Many insurance companies require carriers to have drivers that are at least 25 years of age. However, there are many states that allow a 18 to 21-year-old drive an 80,000-pound truck intrastate. So, you know, that's the possibility of looking at that demographic group was one of the major findings out of a University of Tennessee Business School report that was sponsored by Ryder System, looking on supply chain talent and how we're going to fill the seats. You know, in tandem to this, the American Transportation Research Institute just announced that they're doing a pilot project in Minnesota in conjunction with the Minnesota Trucking Association. It's going to look at the records of young drivers, those 18 to 21, versus the older experienced drivers, and review the safety data, because Minnesota allows drivers under 21 to drive a commercial motor vehicle intrastate. Now I know some of you are like, whoa, today's 30 was, today's 30-year-olds were yesterday's 20-year-olds. They're still, playing with their, the iPads and everything else and all the technology. So for those folks, maybe you'd rather go to a driverless truck than consider having an 18, 19, or 20-year-old behind an 80,000-pound truck. It's just one of those things. Just something to think about, that's all. And finally, I reported last year at the Detroit conference, brought you up to speed on the Obama legacy as it pertains to greenhouse gases and their push for the first time, establishing a MPG standard for trucks. We don't know. There's two schools of thought there. Are they going to look at just the engine, or are they going to be looking at the engine, the cab, and the trailer? We believe they're going to be looking at the engine, the cab, and the trailer. We, knock on wood, feel we have been successful in discussions with the EPA to eliminate car haulers from that equation on the trailer side. But if they do it on the cab side, I'm not sure what the implications are going to be relative to aerodynamics on a cab, or more importantly, if they make changes to the engine, is that going to increase the engine compartment, and there again, increase the bumper to back of cab, which there again decreases our cargo carrying capacity. What we do know is that we expect within the next week or the week after, this proposed rule of 1,000 plus pages is going to be released, and we'll be studying it very carefully. And another nice positive note, just this morning, the National Transportation Safety Administration announced that beginning in model year 2017, all new trucks will be required to have electronic stability control devices going forward. So as other panelists have said, it's the new normal, or is it a constantly changing normal? And with that, I say thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob, giving us a look at some of the important legislative aspects which are impacting the industry here, and which further changes we might be seeing. Before we do our Q&A, we have one last panelist, who's usually also worth the wait. Scott Naz, Metrogistics.
So the last presentation, the last panel on the longest day. I got to up the sponsorship next year, I think. This is, it's a kind of a tough spot, but it's intimidating coming here and trying to, speaking in front of 500 people, and I know a lot of the folks in the crowd. So I asked my wife Amber. I said, "Give me some hints. What would you do?" And she said, "Number one, don't act that smart. Number two, don't act that intelligent. Number three, just be yourself." So I was like, "Is that a compliment, or I didn't get that?" But hey, it works. So I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of come speak. This forum is great. The finished vehicle logistics team has been great for us. We sponsor every year, and we really appreciate it. The reception last night was awesome. And one fascinating fact about the reception. So you come here enough years in a row, you can actually see yourself aging and maybe getting more round through the characterizations from the artist. And if you could put them next to each other, you can actually see that. So year-over-year growth, I guess, is, we're doing some other year-over-year growth. But so talking about the new normal and kind of where Metrogistics is, we have a family of companies. I'm the owner of Metrogistics. We have Roadsign, which is our ePod app and our driver's app. We're going to talk through some of the technologies that we have today. Through an acquisition last September, we partnered up with Precision Motor Transport Group, which is 275 trucks based in Lansing, Michigan, servicing a lot of customers out of Baltimore. So really became more of an asset medium platform. We have the logistics end with Metrogistics. And McNutt is one of the other companies that we absorbed in the acquisition, and we have the assets with PMTG. So it's a really unique and dynamic product offering now that we're kind of coming to the industry with, which is really exciting. So from new normal perspective, I was putting a lot of thought in this and listening through a lot of the presentations today, and it seems like when you talk about a new normal, it seems like there's a lot of issues that keep coming up, right? You have capacity constraints, you have the ebb and flows, you have the EKG graph that Sarah put on in her presentation with Jack Cooper, and from our perspective and where we kind of fit, the EKG graph is actually our heartbeat. That's what we love. That's where we fit best. So bringing extra capacity and creating really a vibrant marketplace of carriers, that's what we're trying to do. So I have a little clip. My marketing budget isn't quite as big as some of the others, but I have a little clip we're going to show here. Get to it here. This kind of is a good kind of 30,000-foot view of kind of what we're about. So you saw the last slide there, kind of flexibility. So flexibility in the marketplace, a lot of the manufacturers, they go through that EKG graph, right? The volumes are up and down. They're all over the board. You got ships coming in, and the carrier might not be able to support it. So what we really focus on is being kind of there to support in times of need. We want to create solutions for all the customers whenever the need may exist. So really the things that we focus on is how do we create this vibrant marketplace of carriers on the logistics side. So there's, Jack Cooper, for example, has 4,000 trucks. In our carrier network, we've signed up and onboarded over 4,000 carriers. It's 4,000 separate carriers. There's one truck up to 4,000 trucks in those 4,000 carriers. So that marketplace, it's a vibrant, it's a living marketplace and there's capacity out there really at your fingertips that a lot of customers may not even realize. So through our technologies and the things that we're doing, it's how do you take that marketplace and really how do you create a real-time environment with technology so you're communicating seamlessly to all these different carriers, and you're also, how do you create a really solid compliance and certification process. So we have a product called SaferShip that we've created, and we've connected with the DOT and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and also at the CSA level, where we can see everything about the carriers that we have signed up using their motor carrier numbers. So we can see their insurance levels and their out of service frequencies. We can see their ownership changes, address changes, you name it. We get, every night, all of our carriers get flushed through this product, and we can really see what's going on out there with 4,000 carriers every day. So out of 4,000 carriers, I think we have 2,200 and change that are certified through our Safer Ship process. And we go out and we audit those carriers, and we're creating somewhat of a social media, Facebook per se aspect, where carriers can show us pictures of their trucks. We can communicate with them. They can, they can be proud of what they're doing and being part of our network. So that's kind of on the safety and certification end of it. The second part of it is our road sign app. So it's our full driver app. So they can do everything. It's ePod capable. But the most important thing is, in our world, how do you solve the golden goose problem is, how do you know what everybody's doing at all times, right? Because we have 4,000 separate companies and we're dispatching to hundreds of companies every day. How do we know exactly where they're at? So the infrastructure didn't exist 5 years ago for us to do that. Today, it exists through your smartphone. When you sign up for us, you have to enable your location services to be part of our network. We know where your truck is because we can see your phone or your smart-enabled device. So if you tell us you're going to deliver the car in Detroit in an hour and you're in Charlotte, we know that. And we can see that visually. We're creating somewhat of the Uber platform in vehicle shipping space. We can see trucks visually on a map as they move around the country, and we know where capacity is. So today we service a sliver of the industry, and we do backup and supplemental and single moves, and we'll do anything for anybody if they need it. But the bigger picture for us is we're creating this vibrant marketplace of carriers, over 4,000 of them. So the next step for us is, it's kind of like your opportunities are endless almost when you have kind of capacity at your fingertips like that. So those are some of the things we're doing from the technological aspects, and just from the bottom of my heart as the owner, we service a lot of customers in the room right now. I couldn't say thanks enough. We really appreciate the business, and everybody in our team appreciates the business too. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott, for, again, giving us some new ideas there, showing the potential for technology and how we might use that to really optimize the network and eliminate some empty miles, and it's kind of a theme that picks up that we heard earlier today as well. We're going to move to the Q&A now, get a chance for the audience to get involved before we do the sponsor voting, and then, of course, gala dinner. So same format. If you wait for the microphone, say your name and company, and ask your question. You can also put it onto the live platform if you're shy, but we'll always give preference to those who raise their hand. So anybody have a question to start us off? Okay, I'll go first then. Glenn mentioned in his presentation that he, or Glovis is obviously considering, or in some cases has made some modal shifts from rail to truck. Brian, I know from past presentations during what I call the winter of discontent, we made a lot of deviations from rail to truck and talked about potentially doing some more permanent shifts. Can you give us a sense of where you are now with that? Has that kind of come to pass? Has there been some targeted shifts, or in fact, have you kind of stayed pretty stable with the rail?
Started out with Glenn, and then you slid to me.
Tricky like that.
Glenn stepped back. So yes, we do have a number of cases where, and as I mentioned, we've had very good open communication with the railroads. And when we really sat down and said, look, what's the capacity that you can really support? What can you really do? Don't tell us what you'd like to do. Tell us what you can really do so we can plan around that. And once we got to down to those numbers, then we were able to, for lack of a better term, create permanent deviations and actually put some of those deviations on longer term contracts, made it a little better deal for Toyota. We get a more competitive rate, but it also made a commitment to the carrier, to the truck carrier, so that they could do some permanent staffing and equipment allocation for that as well. So, and I think it just really goes to that communication level of Tell us what you can really do, and we'll work with you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Anybody have a question? Bob, earlier today we heard from Mike Riggs about the weight exception, which obviously Glenn referenced as well. Glenn, you're getting referenced in all my questions, but so far you're dodging them. So, can you give us a little bit more insight into I don't know what the status of that legal process is? I mean, is that something that's in this bill, this highways appropriations bill, that may or may not pass anytime soon, or is that wrapped up in something else? Because it's just a bit confusing from my side of what that process is right now.
What we are attempting to do is, in the highway reauthorization legislation, have the provision inserted to allow for our tolerance and our additional length. What I referenced earlier with the hours of service was basically the appropriation bill. So there's two mechanisms. The appropriation bill is the bill that funds the Department of Transportation, and it's called THUD because it's also with the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development agencies in the country. So the hours of service thing went appropriations, and we're just going to try and get it inserted in the highway reauthorization bill, which keeps getting extended and extended and extended. Hopefully, Chairman Schuster wants the extension to end by September, and he wants to try and get a bill done by the end of the year, hopefully.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Glenn, you're not going to escape, I'm afraid. Looking at Mexico, you're obviously looking at different options. I mean, first, I just kind of wanted to kind of clarify how it will work in terms of Glovis handling those flows. Will you take over from plant release? Will you work with Glovis Mexico? Will it be coordinated? I mean, are you looking at it more from a North American perspective, or is it kind of chopped up into its national pieces?
So there will be a Glovis Mexico. There actually already is a Glovis Mexico. They will be operating the vehicle processing center in Mexico. We will be we'll be working for Kia Motors America.
Okay. So
we will take control of the vehicle once it's loaded onto a rail car.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, looking at, obviously we have a whole conference on Mexico, so we know there's plenty of challenges down there to go with the growth, and obviously rail and short sea capacity being amongst the top questions. Monterey, is that, you think, a particularly advantageous location for vehicle logistics, shipping and export, or I'm not sure that those are always the first decisions that car makers make when they choose locations, but we say it's a more advantageous location than, central Mexico, or?
Yeah, I don't think it was a prime consideration when they chose Monterey, but they did consider logistics in that decision a lot more than they did in prior plants that I was involved with. So it definitely played a part, both inbound logistics and outbound. Okay. I mean, we're pretty optimistic that that's going to be a pretty good location. One of the disadvantages we have is that if we go short sea, it is quite a haul over to an ocean port. So that's something that concerns us. But rail-wise, I think we're in a good position.
And of course, Brian, Toyota has joined the Mexico March, obviously both with the Scion out of Salamanca, but more notably with the new plant that will come online. Is this something you've already started to look at in terms of what that solution, and is that a potential to work more closely with the production out of Salamanca, together with Mazda, Honda, or others, for example?
Yeah, at Toyota, one of the things TLS was involved in was we've been involved in evaluating plant sites in Mexico for almost 24 months. Wow. Prior to that decision being made. So we were an integral part of that decision process. We actually had a team that went and visited sites, evaluated them based off the site in terms of our yard system and the yard layout, but also for rail access, truck access, the quality of the highway, and all of that. And we were one of many groups that were contributing to our assessment of the different sites. In terms of Salamanca versus the New Mexico plant site for Toyota, They're about 45 minutes apart right now. There may be some synergies there. We really are not looking at those, from the outset.
Right.
Because we're really kind of taking advantage of Mazda's logistics setup out of Salamanca. So that's really our primary.
Are you sharing some capacity with Mazda specifically in the transport flows?
We are not collating rail, but we are working with Mazda in forecasting rail cars and in forecasting the various capacities for both rail car and truck. We have a fairly large amount of truck for Mexico domestic market for those vehicles coming out of there. Probably about 65% of the Mexico domestic vehicles coming out of Salamanca will truck. But for our vehicle, for the rest of the vehicles for Toyota and Scion, it's about 35% short C and about probably around 55-60% direct rail.
Okay. Any input from the audience right now? You're thinking about like the sunset in a cocktail, I imagine, at the moment, but we want to still take advantage of this great panel. So, Scott, you have 4,000 carriers involved with this. So, is there, particularly with dealing with car manufacturers, perhaps more than auction side, how open are they to potentially sort of on-the-spot trucks that they might not have had all the chance to fully kind of go through the service level agreements and hit all of their criteria or whatever that means? Is that a stumbling block in some ways? You find OEMs open to that? Or?
I think for the most part, it's over the last couple of years, it's definitely changed. I think 5 years ago, brokering was looked at really as a dirty term in the industry, and I think it's logistics, asset light, and people are more warm up to the idea because there's logistics companies out there, not just us, but we're all doing really great things, really utilizing the newest of technologies to bring a more credible product to the marketplace. And every day, our business, we'll ship 150,000 cars this year, and half of those will be new, and half of those will be on the remarketed side. But every day we're getting calls to help. Today we got called to help at Milpitas, 150 units a day. So it's just things. I think the idea is becoming more credible through really technology and the good work of the other logistics providers out there. Absolutely.
I suppose if someone had told me a couple of years ago that I would use a phone and then get in the car of a stranger for him to entrust it, I wouldn't have said it, but I'd probably do that every week now. So I think people do. We are seeing these changes. Yeah. Glenn, you talked obviously a lot about the industry investing in capacity, kind of trusting the numbers, so to speak. In Europe, Glovis has obviously recently acquired or taken control of a trucking provider, so having some direct ownership of assets. Toyota has them for a long time. Is this something that you've considered or are considering in the U.S.?
It is something that we have looked at very carefully, and we do have interest. May not be the best time to go out and buy that type of a operation, but we have interest.
Okay. Any last? I'll give the audience one more chance. Otherwise, I think we'll probably move on to the sponsor questions. But I'll give you your last chance.
So, can a panel member ask a
yes,
question?
please do. Yeah.
Bob, does the industry track? Is there any way that they can tell how many rail diversions took place to truck within?
I'm going to say no.
It doesn't get tracked.
It's the only way you could do it is if the manufacturers, if you folks just reported it to an independent third party, like VHTTF or basically Alice. If they could,
so do you think?
I think probably the best answer is if that was going to be done, it would probably have to go through the Alice group.
Right. So do you think that if all of us weren't doing rail diversions and shuttles off-site because they can't get rail cars, do you think we'd still have a trucking capacity problem? So my question is the capacity problem due to all that, or would we have it anyway?
I think we'd still have it.
Okay. Yeah. And then is the industry, are the members of your group tracking the average miles per shipment?
I'm sure they do.
But you don't share that as a group?
No.
Yeah,
No.
okay. Just curious if that's growing.
Well, we could.
Okay, I think that's probably where we'll leave the questions for the panel. I would like to give our panel a round of applause here for their time and for their presentation. Like I said, right-sizing as a word somehow was loaded to me. For some years, I think that usually meant firing a lot of people, but luckily in this case, it's not. Obviously, right-sizing could be investment in capacity. It could be more investment in technology to make the capacity smarter. I think the presentations we saw earlier in the day, particularly on the rail, about improving the cycle time is the equivalent of I can't remember how many thousands of rail cars. So it's not always about spending all the money on bricks and mortar or on trucks, but working more smartly together, that could be the best way to right-size, to use the word. We're going to move on now to our survey voting, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session. So what we'll ask you to do is to use your smartphone, your tablet, mobile, computer, whatever you have, if you have. Most of you, I imagine, have some access to the internet. And this is, to repeat ourselves, this is how you can log on. So there's a bit.ly address at the top there. It is the event, basically it's on the event page of this, on our website for Finished Vehicle Logistics North America. You can click through and find it there. We'll give you guys a minute or so to do that, because you do need your email address, obviously, and the registration number, which again is on your badge. Whilst you're doing that, I'll just kind of remind you all about the gala dinner, which is coming up straight after this. I think it's going to be a very special one, taking advantage of where we are here in California, being right kind of on the beach. When you go out this room, you can make a left and go straight out this ballroom and through a parking lot. There'll be someone there or some signs to point you through. It's about a 10-minute walk. It's basically in the direction of where they're doing the car auction, so you're going to see the classic car auction. So maybe you can put in a bid on your way over or something, but I think you'll see like a white tent, and that's basically the direction you're going to be heading in. But we'll guide you there. You can also go out via the back side of the hotel. We'll also have some signs there in case you're going to your room in the meantime. Again, that's going to be hosted by Jack Cooper, and it will go through to 9:30 or so. If you want to drive, there are instructions as well at the registration desk. So, I mean, it'd probably be about a 45-second drive, but I guess that's not so unusual in California to do that kind of drive. So, we're not going to insist that you use a Prius or a hybrid or something to do it. We'll tolerate. Okay, so hopefully now most of you are logged in or have managed to get in to our live site, where you'll see the screen. Don't click the screen if you're in the room to start, because then you're going to have the noise of me speaking. It's going to be weird. I'll hear my echo back and stuff. You should see the Q&A. Oh, sorry, the poll is either you scroll down, or I think if you're on a mobile, you'll actually get a tab that you have to press the tab, and then you'll see the questions come up. Just a quick kind of word for those listening live outside of the room. So this is not for people in the room. You guys can ignore me. There is a slight delay between the video that you see and the audio. This is so we can actually edit out Louis' really dirty jokes in time before they go out to a mass audience. No, actually, there's just a delay. So if you're only following what you see, it's not synced. So look at the question and answer there, as opposed to following that way. So, but everyone else is just normal procedure. Okay, so our first question. These again were provided by our gold and global sponsors. First question is from Voith, and that is, what is the most important attribute of a yard manager which supports manufacturing plants? Plants, rail, ram, support processing, so any of the kind of yards. Would you say that it's lowest cost? Is it the highest perceived quality? Is it process reliability? Is it operational excellence or advanced technology? If you could just vote now, please. Okay, pretty overwhelming response there for process reliability, 89%. So it's good that you all agree. The bad news is that from what I understand today, you have absolutely no reliability at the moment in the kind of output, but obviously stabilizing that is key to making the yards work more efficiently. So thank you for that. Next question is from Metrogistics. And so this is, how often do you make special transportation arrangements outside of normal business flows? And this is, of course, I think we can put it across any transport mode. Is that fewer than 5 times per month? Is it 5 to 10 times per month, 11 to 20 times per month, or it just seems like every day you're doing this? We have a very strong set of answers, very determined answers in this survey so far, leaving very little room for anything else. So 88% more or less, or 83% seems like almost every day. I was just noticing that 88 and 13 seem to add up to more than 100, but I think it's some rounding thing. It's a good thing we're not in a business that has to do with maths or anything like that, right? So, our next question is from ICL Systems. And this is, what segment of transit has the poorest visibility in your supply chain? Is it direct truck from origin? Is it the rail transport? Is it the ocean side? Is it the final truck delivery leg? Or is it actually within a port or processing facility? So I guess in the yard. So where do you have the poorest visibility currently? So this is a little bit more interesting, I suppose, not as definitive as our other questions. It's a dead heat. Well, I guess we can't really say first, because I guess this isn't really winning in this when you come first in this answer. But so rail and ocean, both at 27%, have the poorest visibility. Not too far behind is within the port or processing facility. And it seems like the trucking side, whether from origin or whether in the final, seems a little bit more reliable. But if you put it together, it's still 26%, I suppose. So, okay. Next question is from Valenius Wilhelmsen Logistics, and that is, where in your inbound supply chain do you see the most room for improvement? Is it in ocean transportation? Something about the last question might give you a hint. Inland distribution? Is it finishing, processing, and accessorization for operations? Is it handover between suppliers or key points? Or is it third-party supplier administration and processes? So which of these areas do you see the most room for improvement? Okay, we again have a dead heat. Inland distribution and third-party supply administration and processes. So interesting there that it's not a pure sort of transport story there. There's obviously definitely room to improve how we do business. I suppose this can be in things like proof of delivery or payment systems, or however we're kind of managing the supply chain beyond just the operations. And of course, there's inland distribution issues. Processing and acceleration, not that far behind either. This is our last question, pretty straightforward. In your opinion, what is more important today in regards to automotive logistics? Is it efficiency or is it capacity? I can just have you vote now, please. Well, that's the answer I think we would have hoped to get, putting two and two together, that being more efficient means more capacity. But as we saw in an earlier question, sometimes putting numbers together don't always add up to 100, do they? So that was our last question. Thanks to our global and gold sponsors for providing those. Thank you for your participation. We're now going to, like, as mentioned, we're going to go to a gala dinner. So if you want to walk, like I said, you can make a left out this room and we'll guide you there. Or we have some signs if you're going out from the hotel. But you're going to join us by the dunes just outside, about a 10-minute walk or so. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks again for a great day today. And we'll also be back here tomorrow morning.